one was talking much about China today, because in the middle of all this fixation on how evil Vladimir Putin is and all the Chinese, this was an incredible development. They took one of our little drone subs, for want of a better word, that was sort of mapping out the floor of the South China Sea. Nothing spying or intelligence. These are international waters. And then all of a sudden, the Chinese, in front of us on an oceanographic vessel that was doing this work for the United States, seized that drone, despite the guys on this boat saying, no, don't take it, don't take it. The Chinese never uttered a word. They walked off with it. They still have this thing, unmanned drone, took it away, and nothing could be done to stop them. They ignored our treaties when we kept telling them to stop it. And it got me thinking. It happens sometimes, but remember that report card I told you about? This is why Donald Trump has been saying Russia isn't so much his worry. Long before this happened, China is. Let's go back in time, and I mean 6 years back in time. Take a look.
China is absolutely taking advantage of this country, Neil, and I feel it very strongly. I know many Chinese people. I know many Chinese businessmen, and they laugh at the stupidity of our politicians.
So what would you do if China were telling you, straighten up and fly right, U.S. get your debt under control, don't lecture us about our currency, on and on and on? What would a secretary or a president, Donald Trump, say and do?
I'd tax the hell out of them. I would tax them back to China.
I had awful hair back then, but enough about me. Let's go to a guy who has a substantive look at what's being done here, retired fourth-star Army General Jack Keane. You know, it's interesting, General. For all the years when we used to talk to each other, and Donald Trump was talking about his worries across the globe, China was first and foremost how they rig their currency, how they rig trade, how they rig advantages, how they play fast and loose with the rules. There was an intrinsic lack of trust, much more so than he ever was worried about Russia. But Russia didn't come up much today in the press conference, or China didn't come up much today in the press conference. Russia did. I think Donald Trump has said consistently, the Chinese are the ones we have to really deal with. Where do you stand on this?
Well, I think the real issue facing the United States, beyond the fact that radical Islam has morphed into a global jihad, let's just set that aside. What the United States is facing in terms of major global security challenges is simply this. We're in a great power competition with Russia and with China, and both of these countries, Neil, want to disrupt the international order that the United States has led in establishing from post-World War II. They no longer see that international order in their national interest, and they are methodically going about trying to disrupt it and eventually trying to eliminate it. And that is what is happening in the South China Sea with the militarization of it. The Chinese have now unfolded a strategy which they have kept secret for a long time, and many of us didn't know for sure where they were heading. And that clearly is that China fully intends to dominate the Pacific and dominate Asia, and they're going to use their military to assist in achieving that level of control.
You know, they've been doing this for years, but what's surprising about this latest incident we got word of, General, is that they're upping the ante and obviously showing no signs of stopping it. By that I mean claiming that essentially all of the South China Sea is theirs and militarizing islands that only belong to them in rapid-fire fashion, and then now promising to do still more and more or less sort of throwing it back in the face of the president-elect to see what he does. What should he do?
Well, I mean, first of all, we have to make up our mind that the United States' national interests are at stake here, and those of our allies.
Do you think they are, General?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the Pacific, we are a Pacific nation. We have every right to be there. We have every right to be in the global commons, in the waterways that are in that area there. China wants to influence and control that. They want to influence our allies. Every ally in the region, except for North Korea, is allied with the United States as an ally. And they need to know that we're going to be there, and we're not going to disengage as we have done in Europe, as we have done in the Middle East. And here's the other thing that we have to understand. There will be confrontations. It's inevitable. We should not be afraid of a confrontation. We'll try to avoid it if we can. But what we don't want to do is have a confrontation lead to conflict. But the fear of confrontation, which I believe the Obama administration has done now for 8 years, and it has led to emboldening our allies, Russia to be sure also, China also as well, That is, they have to clearly know that the United States has staked out its national interest here. Here's what we intend to do. Here's what our boundaries are. And we're not going to be pushed around. They have to clearly understand that.
It's how you respond. And, you know, a lot of my geeky friends in the finance world, General, if you'll indulge me, say the reason why you tiptoe around the Chinese is they owe so much of our debt. It's so crucial to our trade. And just, you know, having someone finance our spending spree that's gone on for decades now. And they don't want to do anything to upset the cart. But I think the more time you play on defense, you'll never get on offense. And one thing that was profound, I remember that Donald Trump mentioned years ago is, and I don't know whether you agree with this, he was seeking more from an economic perspective, that the Chinese need us a hell of a lot more than we need them. That yes, they buy our debt and finance our spending spree, but where would they be without us? In other words, where would they go short of that? Now, we shouldn't be cavalier, but I think his message was, we don't appreciate how much China's in this position because of us, that we've provided buying all of their goods, building this trade surplus, that we are why China is this great success. And he wanted to remind me then, years ago, and I'm sure as president-elect now, I've got your number, China. I know where you stand, and I'm not afraid of you. But the question is, then what?
Well, I totally agree with that approach. I mean, frankly, the stability and security that the United States has provided in the Pacific Rim, you know, for the last 30 years has led to the economic viability of that entire area, not just China. But many countries have benefited from this. And yes, we have to be tougher with China in terms of them clearly understanding where we are coming from. And it's not just rhetoric that we're speaking about. And certainly we're not talking about necessarily leading to some kind of muscular intervention here with the military, but nonetheless, they are militarizing the South China Sea, and we have every right to be there, and we should be exercising those rights, and our allies have to know unequivocally that we're going to stand behind them. That has not been the case in these last 8 years. And when it comes to what China is doing with cyber espionage and cyber attack on this country, we're talking about Russia with our elections, to be sure, as we should be.
Right.
But what China has done is absolutely outrageous, and we have not pushed back on it, and we should.
And China is the far bigger economic worry, to put it mildly, to say nothing of what they're doing militarily in the South China Sea and elsewhere. General, thank you very much. I hope you have a Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas to you, Neil, and all your folks there.